Okay, hello and welcome to this is the first video, the first time we've actually done a book club, an online book review. So I'm delighted to be joined by Christina Lord. How are you doing, Christina?
I'm really well, thank you, Paul. How are
Good.
you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. So where this has come about, so a lot of people will know that Monday is Inspiration Day for Newcastle Startup Week, the event, but also since the beginning of December, I've personally been structuring my weeks along the same themes as Startup Week. So Monday is Inspiration Day, Tuesday is Getting Started, Wednesday is Funding and Finance, Thursday is Growing and Scaling, Fridays Keep Going or Pivot. So every Monday, what I try and do is I try and fill my day with things that inspire me and hopefully inspire other people. So that includes reading books, listening to podcasts, doing things that are going to kind of fill up my cup, as it were, so that the rest of the week I can share that knowledge and insight and kind of set myself up for the week ahead. And then through the conversations that we've been having, you came up with the idea of doing a book club. So do you want to talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, and how this all fits in with
Yes, I'd love to. Yes, it did. It came up as a very spontaneous idea because I know we share a lot of common kind of books that we enjoy, and you've certainly shared with me some ones that I'd not heard of before, and then vice versa. So it was just one of those throwaway comments, and it was like, yeah, we should just do that, right? And it fits in perfectly for a Monday, because who doesn't need a bit of inspiration in their life? Like we all do, don't we? So it's a cornerstone in what I do. So I'm a core dynamics specialist and coach. And what does that mean? Well, essentially, I'm an energy specialist. So the type of coaching I do is more kind of therapeutic coaching, in that I basically help clients unearth their inner power. And I mean, The Alchemist is a perfect book to talk about this, because I think a lot of the time, you know, people get into an autopilot way of living, you know, like we'll touch on in the book. We start off as young people full of, you know, ideas and possibilities. And then over time, especially when we get into adulthood, we kind of lose that and we get almost embroiled in life and the shoulds, and we get then trapped into this hamster wheel, and then suddenly we can find ourselves just not living, like thriving in our lives, and instead we can just go through the motions. And so specifically I help people who have kind of lost the fire in their belly, essentially, and just to reignite that flame from within. So it's one-to-one generally, but I also do a bit of group coaching as well. And I've got some exciting workshops in the plans too, which obviously I'll share in time, along when we do more and more of these book reviews. So yeah, that's me.
Great, yeah. Well, definitely since I got to know you and start following what you're doing on social media. I mean, you're sharing stuff pretty much every day of the week, aren't you? Like you're sharing your own inspirational words of wisdom, your walk my talks, short little videos, and your other videos that you do across the week. And then just a lot of the things that you talk about just really resonate with me. I find that I'm sitting there nodding, like pretty much everything they say. And then when we've had conversations, when we've met up and we've had conversations, we're definitely on the same wavelength, interested in the same sort of things. So I think this is a good book to start with. The Alchemist is
Perfect, actually.
Yeah. So so we'll talk about this. A lot of people have read The Alchemist, or they've at least heard of it. I only read it in April this year, so I was aware of it, and it was on my wish list of books to read. But as you can see behind, I've got loads of books that I've read, and I've still got some more to read. So, but I got someone lent me the copy in April, and I'm really glad that they did, because it kind of came at a good time for me, kind of clarify some of my thoughts. And I made loads of notes, which I've shared with you. I mean,
I love them. They were very helpful.
So yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, so I'm going to get this right because I did check it up. So it's written by a Brazilian guy called Paulo Coehlo,
Well done. Good pronunciation.
A lot of people get his name wrong. It was written way back in 1988, so it's been around a long time, and apparently it's been read by, this will be out of date by now, over 62 million people, and it's been top and bestseller list in 74 countries around the world. So it's a huge global phenomenon, and it's loved by everyone. It's loved by people like Oprah Winfrey, Will Smith, Russell Crowe, you name it. Like, people love it. So, shall I give a little synopsis of what the book's about, and then?
Yeah, then we can go into the guts of it. Yeah, good idea.
So the general gist of it is, it's Santiago, who's a young shepherd in Andalusia, which is in southern Spain, and then he feels like there's more to life. He's not quite happy with what he's got, with his lot. And he dreams of adventure and going off to find his fortune in far off land. So he decides to leave the life that he's got, which seems like quite an idyllic life that he's got. But he decides to set off and travel over to Morocco, and then go across the Sahara Desert to the pyramids of Egypt, where he believes he's going to find his buried treasure. And along the way, he meets various characters who kind of teach him things about life, the meaning of life, and what it's all about. And so yeah, that's kind of the general gist. So do you want to follow up?
No, I just want to share with people, because I know you said you read it not so long ago. I read it years ago. Like, I can't actually even articulate like when I read it. And it's funny now, when we spoke about it, it's made me revisit it. And I'm really glad that I did, because I just think, I didn't probably grasp the depth of the book when I read it a few years ago, because this quest that Santiago goes on has got so many kind of layers to it, isn't it? Because, like you say, it's like a young boy who dreams, he has these dreams, these kind of omens that they described in the book, as to that he knows there's something else out there. And so it's almost like a pull, like a intuition that he's being allowed to, like, allowing himself to go on this journey. And what really struck me is, and I'll just share a little bit of what it resonated with me. 5 years ago, I kind of hit the effort button on my life, in the same way that I was dissatisfied, right? And this is partly why I created Authentic Action Coaching a couple of years ago, because I had lost my mojo. I had lost real meaning and purpose in my life. But I had, the ticky box list that you get of, like, I'll be happy when. Like, most of the boxes were ticked, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And so that, for me, led me to travel for a year solo. I did a round the world trip, and that's what reminded me of little Santiago, of not knowing what was ahead of me, but trusting that it was like my soul told me to do it. That's what I believe. It was like this instinctual thing. And I remember when I handed my notice in at my job for 10 years, my boss looked at me like I had 3 heads. He went, "But what are you going to do? Like, why are you going?" And I remember saying to him, "I don't know that, but that's exactly why I need to go." Yeah. Because I need to, like, inject some energy and adventure back into my life, because I'd lost appetite for my life. Yeah. And I think for Santiago, it's almost like he'd just grown a bit bored, a bit kind of, what's this all about? Right, I'm going to go on an adventure. And I think a lot of the time we lose that spark sometimes, because life just becomes this hamster wheel. Yeah. And I think a lot of us, we're born with this instinct, aren't we, when we're very, very young? I mean, you've got young kids, you could probably attest to this, Paul, just how instinctual children are.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know, definitely. I mean, my kids, just the things that they come up with, and the creativity and the ideas that they have. I don't want them to lose that. I mean, you do kind of, I think careers advice is part of the problem, isn't it? Like when you're at school, you get guided down a certain path, because that's just what people do, or people like you, that's what you do. And that is a shame, isn't it? Like, people do get sort of boxed in and kind of steered down a certain way. I mean, it's it's right for some people, and some people, a lot of people are very happy with that. But yeah, you definitely, the line of work that you do, you're dealing with a lot of people who get to a certain point where they think, is this it? And kind of lost the mojo, or kind of sort of questioning why they're doing what they're doing, and searching for something a bit more.
Yeah, even people that have reached quite a high level of success in their life.
Yeah.
Like they've climbed the ladder, they've followed the advice, they've followed the I'll be happy when agenda.
Yeah.
But then they've got there and gone, and what next, and what next, and what next? And I mean, that's one of the key things in the book, that it talks about this kind of living in the present moment, and that allowing you to tap into your intuition. Because I truly believe before COVID, we were all suffering from the busy being busy disease.
Yeah.
But we didn't, we were too busy to reflect, too busy to stop and think. And I think that's where we trip up, because our intuition, which is our inner voice, our instinct, it whispers to us, and we can only really hear it when we're quiet, whereas our fear shouts at us. So we can hear our fear really, really clearly, really loudly, because that's our survival instinct. That's how we're wired. But I think upon quiet reflection, which is almost, I think the picture that's painted in the book with Santiago is that he is quite a reflective character. And he has this dream and he responds to it. And I think for a lot of people, it's almost like they've cut off their flow, like they're standing on their own hose pipe of that connection to their intuition. Because let's face it, and you just said yourself, you don't want your children to lose their instinct and their natural ability to be creative and inventive. What we are, and I know this for a fact, like I think back and think, God, I was taught to trust my logic over my intuition.
Yeah.
I don't think I didn't even know what intuition was. And I think a lot of the time people think, oh, well, that's woo-woo stuff, that's spiritual, but it's not. It's kind of how we're wired. And I think these times, and you've probably seen it too, Paul, like out of COVID, it's created a lot of time for introspection, where people have kind of really got close up and personal with their discomfort and thought, actually, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Or do I want to be in this relationship? Or do I want to be, work in this project? Whatever it is, it's asking those questions.
Yeah, definitely. When sometimes things are forced upon you, and you would never make a decision otherwise, but actually it could be the best thing ever when that decision's taken away from you in a way. I know you've talked about sometimes people get made redundant, or something happens, some major life changing event, and but actually what does this make possible? What opportunity can I now pursue that I would never dream of doing before, because this is my life, this is what I was doing. But why?
It's just a shame that I think a lot of people have got to get to existential crisis before they wake up.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've seen, I have been talking quite a bit about positive triggers, right? Because I think there's a lot of people who they usually make a major change in their life, or they'll change a job, or they'll start a new business or something when something negative happens. When they get made redundant, or they hate their boss, or someone gets ill, or they get ill, or someone dies, unfortunately, or a relationship ends, or something like that, right? And time again, that does happen, right? And but the problem with that, I think, is people are usually at a low point. They're at a weak point when that happens. So to start something new, it's difficult anyway. But if you start at a weak point, it's even harder, right? But if you get people at a high point, you give them some positive triggers. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to try and do through. That's what I try to do with the Startup Week event and Founders Friday and other stuff I try to do. because I think then if they've got more chance of being successful.
I completely agree. And I think, you know, it's energizing people in that, you know, and what I coach upon is the 7 levels of energy, or the 7 lenses through which we see our situation. And it is imagining, you know, a filter where we've got the antithesis of fear at the bottom and the antithesis of fearlessness at the top of this arc. And I think you're right. I think when we are at our weakest, we fall prey to victimhood. Like, we feel at the effect of life, like life happens to us. And we've all been there, you know, and we all continually go there. You know, there's times in your life where you do feel like that. But to your point, there's also times where you feel like there's opportunities everywhere. Like, actually, you are inspired by meeting other like-minded people, by following a passion project, like whatever that is. And so if you are triggered positively, then follow that and see where it goes, and trust that actually further clarity will come through taking action in finding that, right?
Yeah. So there's a bit that, I mean, there's loads of good stuff in this. Like, I mean, it's all, I'm looking here about, so, I mean, there's a lot of talk about destiny, you know, and fulfilling your destiny and the universe sort of transpiring. You know, a lot of people will be familiar with the law of attraction and the book, The Secret, and all that sort of stuff, which, I mean, I do believe in that. And I know you do as well, don't you?
I do.
So I think the thing that really resonated with me when I was reading it is that definitely if you do, the hard bit, or one of the hardest things, is deciding what you actually want. Right? That is, right? Difficult to know what you truly want and not what you think you should be doing, or what other people are telling you should be doing, or like what you've been brought up to think, right? Which is, it is difficult to break out of that, right? But once you do decide that you want to do something, definitely there's a lot of talk about like the momentum that comes from that, and the energy that once you put that out, once you say that you want to do something to yourself initially, but if you share that with other people, it is surprising how much builds around that, and you do attract like-minded people, and then the momentum builds and they kind of support you, and then like, so do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like,
No, I'd love to. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's expansive energy, and I think when I remember, you know, again, coming across The Secret and kind of going, because I was skeptical on all of this years ago. I was like, yeah.
Time, don't you? Like, you've got to be in the right sort of frame.
You do.
Be receptive to it.
Yeah. But it's funny. Sometimes I think you have to go through some hardship to then, you know, not always, but that was my experience. Yeah. And for me, I mean, now I look at it and think, well, it's quantum physics. It's actually not spiritual. It's spirituality. Yeah, it could be labeled that way, but actually it's quantum physics, which is that like energy attracts like energy. And I actually believe that your energy introduces you before you speak. It radiates from you, because it's not just the words you speak, it's your body language, it's your eye contact, it's the way you carry yourself. And much to your point, if you are allowing yourself, and I use that specifically, giving yourself permission to have ideas and go there, when you're excited, what we do is we share that excitement. Like, it kind of pours out of us and it hits people, because, you know, when you meet certain people, and for those watching, I'm sure you've been to networking events where you'll meet someone who maybe is a bit of a drainer. You know, maybe they're not having a good day, right? And so they're not like radiating a lot of energy, but then you meet other people that are full of ideas, really open, you know, really expansive. And that's where this sharing comes from, to your point, is then co-creation happens. Yeah. The potential for co-creation. And I know, like, we've talked about you being a super connector, which is one of the best phrases you can say in a Northeast accent. But it's true, but that's what you do as well, because you synergize seeing opportunities, don't you? When people's energy, I'm sure you match people together to think, oh, you need to meet that person.
Yeah. No, definitely, it is contagious, isn't it? I think, like, ideas are contagious. You know, that's energy and ideas. If you bring the two together.
Mm.
So so I'm just scrolling through my notes here, right? So it's talking about here. It says here again what you were talking about when you're young. A lot of people kind of it talks about destiny. When you're young, you kind of know what you want to do, but then you get talked out of it. So it's trying to tune back into that, and things do obviously change over time. But definitely, I'm probably going through a bit of a midlife crisis. I'm going back 30 years into the things that inspired me 30
No,
years.
it's not a bad thing though. It's revival, right? It's revival, and I think it's funny, like, when I say about being skeptical about some of this, I remember not so long ago listening to a talk that Russell Brand gave, and he even talked about like Christianity, right? So Easter time, when you talk about revival, so birth and death, and I remember thinking, like, Christ kind of dying on the cross and then being reborn, like, what a load of hooey. That's not possible, da, 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 da. And then Russell shared with me that actually, or no, didn't share with me personally, but his people, that actually that is a story where you can apply that our life is full of births and deaths. It's a continuous cycle, like the seasons.
Yeah.
Spring, new growth. Summer, full bloom, autumn, dying away, winter, and that's nature, and we're no different. And so what we love as children actually is what we end up going back to, because that is the essence, that's our instinctual talent and natural talent that we have. I know that that's happened for me, for sure, 100%.
Yeah. And I know you talk about chapters in your life as well, don't you? Because
yes,
I think they're spot on with that, because like the idea that it's just going to be this like linear, you're just going to follow this path, and it's just, and you're always going to be interested in the same thing. It's not true. Like you change, people change, and it's not to say that I don't think you should ever regret anything. Like
no.
kind of you look at it and think, well, that was that chapter and that's kind of ended, but
yeah.
Okay, it might be a bit sad when things end. You should be happy and grateful that you had that in the first place, and now it's time to move into a new chapter.
I think it's equipping you to look at situations differently. So one of the things I specifically do in my coaching conversations is to neutralize and to drop the judgment of something being good and bad, right and wrong. And if we actually just neutralize it and go, actually, everything that happens, it's just information. And it's how we view that information, which then informs what we then do next with that information. So it's discernment over judgment.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot of people, that's where the struggles are, is like that it's the mixed feelings, because they know that they want to move on, but they kind of feel like they can't, or they feel a bit of guilt, or kind of they feel bad for letting go of something. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think so, because we kind of, I mean, I've joked about this before. I believe we are infinite onions, because we are multi-layered, and there's no end to our layers as people. And I think this is where coaching and therapy and counselling, actually everybody, it benefits everybody, but it's at a time when it's going to benefit you. And I think it's just to gain clarity on where you are. And I think for a lot of people that I partner with, they are ruled by shoulds. They're shoulding all over themselves. And actually what happens, and I've reflected on this personally for me, I became very slowly very unhappy because I was living somebody else's life. I was living according to somebody else's values. I wasn't clear on what I valued anymore, because I was like, oh, but I should want that. I should want that job. I should want that company car. I should want to climb that ladder. I should want children. I should want da 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 da. And actually, everybody's different. And it's just to give people permission to say, no, I don't want that, and for that to be okay. Yeah,
that can be difficult, obviously, for people to do that when you're surrounded by people that expect you to go a certain way, and if you suddenly change, or you start reading books like The Alchemist or The Secret, and then you see things
well, no, but and I think that's the other thing, because I often say that expectations are disappointments waiting to happen. And I think and it's even harder with those that love us. So our family members, our friends, don't they just love to give us advice? They love to give it, even if we don't ask for it. They love to give it anyway. But what generally happens, and this has happened in my own family, they come from a perspective, yes, of love, but from their filter, from what they value. And they go, oh, well, you should do that, or you should do that, as opposed to asking open-ended questions and listening. Just what we don't naturally do, you know.
There's a bit quite early on in the book I've written here, so it sounds negative, but it's kind of, so it's like when someone sees the same person every day, right? They wind up becoming part of that person's life, obviously, right? And then they want that person to change, right? And if someone isn't what others want them to be, the others get angry or frustrated because they want them to. And then everyone seems to have a clear idea of how other people should lead their lives, but none about his or her own. So like you say, they're very good at giving advice to other people.
Oh yeah.
And but not so clear on how they should live their own life. But also definitely, I think people do get used to you being a certain way, and then if you suddenly start behaving differently, it's almost it is uncomfortable for people, and it's almost like a challenge to them.
Oh, it is, yeah, because it's the art of allowing people to be who they be. And I think if we try and put people in boxes and label them to say, oh well, you should be this way, and we unfortunately do that for everyone, so we become codependent. We become, you know, and I certainly did in my, you know, relationship, that my long-term relationship, it was like, oh, I handed over my keys of happiness and put them in his pocket and go, you are now responsible for my happiness. And then you put expectations on your relationships, be that intimate or otherwise. And then if somebody changes, then we have a problem with that, as opposed to leading with curiosity over judgment. And that knowing that we are, and back to the chapters thing, right? We're evolving, like that's what we're designed to do. And that if we were curious, openly curious, instead of, well, this is right, that's wrong, or I do want you to do that, I don't want you to do that. Instead be curious of like, oh, well, what is the opportunity to learn and grow here? Like, what are we learning about each other? Because I think we assume that we know our partners inside out, or we know our parents inside out, or our children inside out, when we don't, because they're learning about themselves all the time. So it's just more of this openness that we're going to change and grow. Whereas our brains were wired for certainty. We love certainty. And that kind of makes us fear being so open, because it then, you know, we kind of maybe come from a place of fear that we might lose that person. But actually, you never own a person anyway. You don't own anybody.
No, you can't, or you shouldn't feel like you got to control that other person. Yeah, but, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about, you know, the phrase unconditional love. Like, I think you love that you have your kids. Like, I've definitely got unconditional love for my kids. Like, they could do whatever they want, and I still love them. I want them to be happy, and but it's that, I think that is, and I definitely feel like I've got that for my parents as well. But like, it's hard to have that with other relationships as well, that unconditional, because you want people to be a certain way, or they want you to be a certain way to complement each other, and that's not always unconditional love, because you change, or you decide that your passions lie not elsewhere as another person, but if you want to try new things and they don't want you to, then that can cause some problems there.
Yeah, and I think growing up, we think of love as being love between people, whereas when you think of unconditional love, it's just that we are all one, so we're all part of the same universe. We're made of the stars. We come from the stars. We're made of the stars. We're all made of the same stuff. And so that's been the interesting thing with COVID as well. It's leveled us all. But I think, to your point, we place conditions as a control tactic, and a control tactic that we know where you are. I know where I am. You know where you are. Like, we're safe. And And I think what I'm really passionate about is like rebranding the unknown, rebranding uncertainty as full of potential, as opposed to it being full of fear, because I think that this all stems from us not really being able to love ourselves unconditionally.
Yeah.
Because we tend to judge ourselves really harshly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, but I always saw that even when I was a kid. I used to think, like, it's not arrogant. I think you've got to love yourself, like, before you can really truly love other people. So even if love your faults as well, it doesn't mean you're perfect, but just accept who you are and love yourself for who you are.
No, it is. And I think, unfortunately, I've seen it probably more, I don't know, over the last 10 years, the rise of social media and everything else, that we have this antithesis of, right, this is what you should aspire to be, this is what you should aspire to live like. And like, we've seen it a lot of like people showing like the glamorous side of their life and not the dark underbelly. And I think we're all getting a bit sick and tired of the glitz and the veneer. And this is why people are really getting hungry for authentic conversation, to say, well, no, actually life is light and dark, right? Isn't it? It's not all roses and rainbows. There's hard stuff to deal as well. And actually it's how we navigate through that. And not to berate yourself to that point, because I mean, you mentioned Oprah before, and she honestly talks about actually people saying to her, oh, like she's full of herself. And then she actually said, well, I take that as a compliment. I am full of myself. Like, my cupboard runneth over. Like, and it doesn't come from a place of arrogance. It comes from a place of, I know who I am. I know what, who I want to be. And for that to be not putting anybody else down, it's just this inner knowing. And I think, I mean, even for my dad's generation, so he's 80 now, and he views that of like, oh, don't stick your neck out. Don't be too full of yourself. It's this kind of almost blend in kind of way of being, which is interesting.
Yeah. I was Sophia Stovall, Tiny Way Archives and Museums. She's from Copenhagen originally, but she did a talk at start of week last year about the similarity between the Nordic and the Northeast sort of culture, like the way personality traits and the way we do business. And she talks about the tall poppy syndrome, where it's frowned upon if you stand out or apart from the crowd, and you tend to get like chopped down and brought down a peg or two if you do that. So I think that is still quite prevalent here in the northeast or the north of England. I think is still there.
Yeah, well, I know when you shared with me, when we talked about the difference even between like the northeast and Sheffield and Manchester, like of like the generational beliefs of the ways people conducted themselves, because it's energetic. It gets passed down through generations and generations, and we've still got remnants of that now, but we have to evolve, because our kids of now and the future have to be creative thinkers and innovative, not just, learn information to regurgitate it or to sit on a factory line and do the same job again and again and again. It's not what we need now. We need innovation and, super connectors, and be able to kind of think outside the box more. That's what we need to move forward, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think creativity, innovation, empathy, authenticity, they're all human traits that you can't replace with a machine. There's a lot of worry about technology replacing humans, and certain situations it is going to happen, or it's already happening, but they can't replace those human traits of creativity, innovation, empathy, authenticity, love, compassion, all that sort of stuff. So it's the more people can focus on that, the better. So you picked a good name for your coaching business, Authentic Acting Coaching.
Well, no, that name came from an epiphany I had during my training to become a coach, because we did some values work. And your values, and this is, again, you don't ever get taught this at school. And a lot of my coaching clients, I will create this inner navigation tool for them, because it's worked for me specifically as well, and I've seen it work for others. And it's really getting clear on what are the cornerstones of actually what's important to you. So you kind of clear away the I shoulds of like other people's values, and you really drill down into what's really important for you, what your key drivers. And when I did that, I had this light bulb went on in my head, and I went, oh my God, like, right. So if I honor what I value, then I'm in alignment, and then I'll be happy, and then I'll be like much happier because I'm being true to myself. And I thought, oh, that's authentic action, right? Aligning what you do with what you love. Mm-hmm. And that's where it was born. So yeah.
I love hearing how people come up with the names for the business or the idea for the business that they're working on. So
yeah, everyone loves a story, right?
yeah, I don't know. You're living proof. You know, you are staying true to what you set out to do. I think everything I've seen you put out anyway. So
thank you. Well, no, I mean, I think that's all that we can ever do. And I think, you know, I mean, you talked a bit about it before, but this was a month ago, I came up with my hashtag walk your talks that I do on Instagram. That was just me. I would be doing that anyway, recorded or not. I do talk to myself. And so I'm a huge verbal processor. Like, that's how I process information. I talk it. And what I find is that by doing that and by showing up wholly and not putting on any airs and graces, not, you know, pretending to know it all, because I don't, but just to share what's worked for me. Like I often think, you know, I'm my own little guinea pig. There's nothing I don't do with my clients that I'm not willing to do myself, or that I've been there myself. And I think that's key, you know, not to be some kind of guru who thinks she knows it all, because that's bullshit.
Yeah, no, well, that comes across that you're, it is like you're the same. You come across the same in real life as you do on that. You know, you're not putting on.
Nope, it's not pretend.
No, it's. I think that's why it resonates with people. Or definitely, it's that authenticity, and it's more interesting because it's. You are very professional. You know, you are very good at it. You know, you're very good talking on video and everything that you put out, but it's not. I was gonna say it's not slick and sort of Americanized, if you know what it like.
Yeah, it's funny because I did do some of my training in America, so that could have rubbed off, but it didn't. No, I could bring in a bit of a Texan accent. No, but I think it's back to, and this is for everybody, right? And this is back to kind of what we're saying about the Alchemist, which is be true to yourself, follow. Because I think a lot of people, where they get tongue-tied is that they feel like they need to have clarity before they take action. And I'm much for the belief that no, you've got to take action, and then whatever happens after that action, that's feedback that you can then do something with. So for me, I started doing live videos over a year ago. I did my Tuesday lives on Facebook. And when I first started doing them, I was so scared. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But what I found by doing it is that I found my voice, literally. I found my voice. And the clarity has come from doing that repeatedly. You know, and I think it's like anything, and it's a great reminder for anyone starting anything. You know, I have people, fellow coaches, say to me, but how do you do that? Like, how do you speak for 30 minutes? And I'm like, well, I could speak all day, quite frankly, but it's because I practice it. And I think, you know, back to your point, if you're being true to yourself, then you can't go far wrong.
Yeah. I think also because you know what you're talking about, you know, you do actually live and breathe this stuff as well. So it's easier for you to talk about that rather than talking about something that you're not really that into, or you're overthinking stuff like that. I think as well, because you're just walking and you know, you are literally walking and talking, and you're out, and you would be doing that anyway. You're not worrying about camera angles, lighting, all this other stuff going on around it. It's just, it's the words and the ideas that are the most important thing. So that's why it works, I think. I was just reading here. So there's something here about, so it says here, there's a language in the world that everyone understood, and it was the language of enthusiasm, of things accomplished with love and purpose, and as part of a search for something believed in and desired. and making a decision was only the beginning. Someone makes a decision, he's really diving into a strong current that will carry him to places he'd never dreamed of when he first made the decision. So it's just getting started, like making that decision to do something, and it's surprising how things will just work out.
It's momentum building, isn't it? And I think where people get stuck is that they focus on not knowing and that being scary, and so they don't do anything as a result. And then they beat themselves up because they're stuck in this procrastination loop. Whereas, and I'm going to bring in a Bowie quote, who I know you like, because I love a bit of David Bowie. So when I chose to go off on my travels, that was very out of character for me. So I was 35 at the time, and I'd never backpacked. I'd gone on holidays, I'd travelled a bit, but I'd never backpacked, and I'd certainly never backpacked solo. And there was numerous times that I had like an out of body experience where I was like, what the actual beep are you doing? Like, is this, is this right? Is this true? Like, what are you going to do? And I came across this David Bowie quote, and it just filled me full of wonder, right? Of what could be. And it said, I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise you it won't be boring. And I just loved it because I just thought it's packed full of potential of what could happen. And I think that's beautifully illustrated in The Alchemist, because he didn't know what was, if he was going to even find this treasure that he dreamed about. He didn't know what he'd find. And so he figured it out along the way, which is a quest, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I know you read it a while ago, and you've read the notes I sent you. I don't know how well you can remember the book, but I mean, it's such a good book. There's so many different layers to it. But I think the treasure is the journey. That's what it is. It's what he finds along the way.
Yeah.
It's not actually the treasure.
It's not the treasure.
Although he does actually find some treasure.
He does. Yes, he does.
It's not necessarily where he thinks it was, but in heading out to find the treasure where he thinks it is, that's the journey, where he finds a treasure along the way in the words of wisdom, and understands more about himself. That's the real treasure. And I think I might have talked about this before as well. There's a Tim Smith, the founder of the Eden Project. I heard him speak once, and he talked about there's no such thing as there. And he was a musician. I didn't realize this, but all he ever wanted growing up was a #1 record, right? And he told this story. It was a brilliant story. He was saying how he was getting driven in a chauffeur-driven limousine, drinking champagne with a bevy of women, right? Around the Champs-Elysees in Paris,
of course.
right? Drinking champagne. And he got told he had a #1 record, right? And he said, I started crying because I still wasn't happy. He said that's all he'd ever wanted, and he still wasn't happy. And he said, since then I've realized there's no such thing as there. Like you get carried away with like living so far in the future, and like you're forgetting to live in the moment and enjoy what you've got right now. And it is the journey that's the best bit.
Oh, it 100% is. And that's what's been so beautiful about revisiting this book, because it reminded me, and also to bring in, there's another book by Joseph Campbell who talks about the hero's journey. So it's again, and it's what a lot of films are based on, like The Matrix, Star Wars, because Joseph Campbell went out and researched a lot of these tribes and stories and fables and legends, and he realized that they all had a similar arc to their story. And it's that often it's the crisis or things plateauing where we were seeking answers or something more meaning. And so then you go through the trials and tribulations and go through the underworld to get tested and challenged by your fear, dragons, whatever they may be, but then go through your rite of passage. I mean, that's what they talk about, And he found that all of these legends had similar storylines, because that's how we are as human beings. And I definitely felt that, like when I deliberately, when I went on my travels, I had specific locations. So I did have a route planned out, but I left space in between for spontaneity, because I used to stay in a lot of hostels. And I would ordinarily, you'd be sitting down for breakfast with a ton of other people, and you would most of the time meet people who just come from where you were planning on going, and they would go, oh my God, you've got to go there because it's amazing. And what I noticed is that I saw other travelers were very super planned and rigid, where they're like, oh, well, I can't do that because I've got to get da, 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 and everything was pre-planned. Yeah. Whereas actually, this was a beautiful analogy for life. If you just live a little bit more open, then if you learn about something, then you can take inspiration and go for it.
Yeah. I think that's important. Yeah, giving yourself some space to create and experience things as well, because you can be too planned and too rigid, and then some of the like you say, some of the experiences that you had would have been totally unplanned, or just serendipity or chance encounters or experience.
Some of my most awe-inspiring moments were completely unplanned, to the point where I'd go, what am I going to do today? I'm going to walk in that direction and then just see what happens. And the beauty of that was that everything was a surprise because there was no expectation. And that, you talk about enthusiasm, that created so much enthusiasm, because then you just trusted that you'd figure it out and that you didn't need to plan everything to the nth degree. And I think now I find myself a business owner, I'm applying how I traveled to my business.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. It will all work out. I mean, there's another. I mean, there's so many good quotes of this. I mean, it's talking about. I love to hear. What's a bit about caravans? Like a caravan in the desert, we make lots of detours, but we're always heading for the same destination.
Yes.
And the Arabic word, which I've not read before, is it maktub? It is written.
It is written.
Mm-hmm. Destiny.
Yeah. Because don't you find that often we're terrified to make the wrong decision?
Yeah.
And I don't actually think that that's possible, because we will course correct, or our soul will course correct us, because we'll go down, or maybe, I mean, so I'm a big believer in that the universe sends you messages. And when I look back, because
isn't it in the book as well,
exactly right. So that's why we say hindsight's a wonderful thing, because it's not until you look back on something and go, well, if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't have done that. And if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have done that. And so I look back, like, for example, for my relationship, and there were a ton of red flags. There were so many red flags. And I was like, oh, look, I ignored them all. I ignored them all because I was scared, if I'm really honest with myself. But what the universe then did is it sent me a message that I couldn't ignore.
Mm.
That was the undertone of, like, I'm going to send you something, Christina, that you're going to have to face, and you're going to have to then make some changes, because I've been sending you about 50,000 of these. So do you want to listen already and do something? And I think that's kind of been the world over. I think the universe has sent COVID for that very same reason. It is a leveler.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's like taking notice now.
It's definitely got our attention globally. For sure.
Yeah, no, it's because a lot of people do choose to ignore things and ignore the signs, like you say, until it's too late, and then and then you have to change. So, but like you say, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Like at the time, it can seem like the worst thing, but actually, in the grand scheme of things, it could be the best thing, or just push you into a new way of living. I'm not belittling things that, like, bad things do happen, but usually you can come out of it stronger, made stronger.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lovely things I like to think of is when we see something as being a roadblock, like I wanted to do that and then I got there and then I can't, is then go, okay, is it a roadblock or is it a redirection?
Yeah.
Because then that, again, opens up more expansive opportunity, like what else is there? And that's where, for me, I think the greatest creativity comes out of chaos, because we have to think differently.
Yeah, I think those are I'm sure me, obviously I'm a fashionista. You know, John Galliano writes about this, about chaos being a great source of creativity.
It is. It is.
When things get destroyed, that's new things get created off the back of it. And then
100%.
the whole idea of like behaving like water, you know, like, okay, water always finds a way around. Like if there's a big boulder or something and there's water, will usually find a way around it. So,
Path of least resistance. Yeah, it's path of least resistance. And I think it's that's why we can learn a lot from nature, because, you know, and I talk a lot about our human condition of suffering. If we're suffering from something, it's a signal that we have a need that is not being met currently.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we are conditioned to distract ourselves, avoid us from the pain or numb from the pain, but not actually deal with the root cause.
Yeah.
And the more we, you know, numb it, distract ourselves from it and stick a plaster over it, the greater that lesson will come, and the more kind of it'll build pressure until it blows, and then we get into crisis mode. And I actually do believe that, you know, if people can actually be honest with themselves, and that's something that we find probably the most challenging, because, you know, suffering plus resistance, it's pain plus resistance equals suffering. So actually the counterintuitive thing to do is to lean into the pain and go and surrender to it and say, okay, what are you here to teach me? Because that's all pain is. It's here to teach you something. It's not meant to take you down.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so it's, you can either, it's like physical. Yeah, if something hurts you, then you can like keep doing it, or you can move away from it, or what you're gonna do. So it is a signal to the brain to do something's happening here.
Yeah, it is, and that's why, because we're fight or flight, right? That's the most primitive part of our brain. The amygdala is the emotional response that we have, which is to survive.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, that can limit us in huge amounts of ways, because we're ruled by fear as opposed to ruled by potential and our absolute potential. And I think, you know, back to some of the stories in The Alchemist, which is he faced things where he lost everything. Yeah. He lost things, but he found a way through. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do. And I think if we just learn to trust ourselves more, that actually, instead of kind of being frozen by fear, and instead go, no, I figure stuff out. That is what I do. And that's what I'll continue to do. Then that's a lot more energizing and expansive type of thinking, as opposed to, no, everything has to be controlled and labeled because I have to have everything to be certain. We don't.
Yeah. There's a line here that says, my heart is afraid that it will have to suffer. And then the response from the Alchemist, I think, to Santiago is, tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself.
Yeah.
And no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because every second of the search is a second's encounter with God and with eternity, right? So it's the fear of failure or getting hurt that stops you from even trying.
Yeah.
And that's worse than actually.
It is. It is. I'm going to throw another quote in there that I often come back to for myself personally. And it was apparently Nelson Mandela said it, but it was, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. Okay. Yeah, and I think that's a really good, strong, I use that a lot, because if I sense that I'm making a decision from a place of fear, then I will bring awareness to the fact that I'm doing that and go, well, do I want to be doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay. Just talking, we've already mentioned it, I think, as a bit, but about people being, I think actually I'm remembering Brad Burton, right, to one of his videos he did during start, he talks about during COVID lockdown, he was saying, you know, people get thinking so far in the future that they get anxious about what hasn't happened yet, or they're looking back at what they've lost and they get depressed. Yeah. So they're stuck because they're either anxious or depressed or both. And Yeah, there's a bit in here. Let's have a look. Yeah, I think it's it's not the alchemist. I think it's the guy who's in the caravan. Like he says, "I'm alive because I don't live in either my past or my future. I'm interested only in the present. And if you can concentrate only in the present, you'll be a happy man. You see there's life in the desert, that there are stars in the heavens, and that tribesmen fight because they are part of the human race. Life will be a party for you, a grand festival, because life is the moment we are living in right now."
Yeah.
And then he says, if good things are coming, they will be a pleasant surprise. And if bad things are, and you know in advance, you'll suffer greatly before they even occur. So it's spot on. It's like, yeah,
It is.
In the moment, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it so is. It's the power of now, because actually now is all we ever have, because now is just, or, you know, what we're currently, you know, here we are right now, living the now, and it's just a collection of now moments. Whereas, you know, I think when we are anchored to the past and maybe reminiscing about, oh, well, maybe what should have been or what could have been, then that can be incredibly draining if we live in the past, and maybe we're harbored by, I don't know, regret or guilt or something that anchors us to what could have been, but it's gone, it's past, you can't do anything about it. So, you know, yes, reflect to learn, but just don't stay in the past. And as far as the future is concerned, yes, you've got a plan. You know, as business owners, we have to plan, but you can overly plan if you're not careful, and then other things change, and then that renders your plans worthless. So then there's getting this balance. It's a balancing act, and we're constantly oscillating between it, but it's giving yourself the permission that actually and I think a lot of it, you know, as you say, that comes up for me, is trust in yourself, and trust that actually in whatever information is presented to you, you will make a decision and you'll figure it out along the way, as opposed to being scared again of making that wrong decision. Something I've said to my dad, because my dad is like the king of worry. Like, he is, oh my God, he needs a medal for the amount of worry he does. They say you shouldn't coach your parents. I say, like I have. But I actually said to him that, I asked him, I said, do you know what worry stands for, Dad? You know, what is worrying? And he looked all confused. And I said, well, it's like praying for what you don't want.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And it's, what a waste of energy that is. Like, why would you pray for what you don't want? So you're going to kind of, because his thing is to, oh, well, I'm going to list out at least 10 different contingencies of what could happen. But I'm like, yeah, but 9 out of 10 of those won't even happen. So what are you wasting your energy thinking about it for?
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it, because I know you talk about this and believe it about, was it where focus goes, energy flows?
Oh yes, where focus goes, energy flows. Yeah.
Because you do, if you're spending too much time dwelling on the things that could go wrong, or thinking about negative things, then you're just bringing unnecessary negative energy into
you are. Yeah, and everything is energy, right? So your thoughts create how you feel, creates then the actions that you take. And so if you're going to think thoughts that make you feel shit about yourself, then that's going to lower your energy. That is going to bring you down to more of a dense energy, where you're going to focus on what you're not achieving, what you don't have, lack, scarcity mindset. And then you're less likely to take a step forward. Whereas if you choose thoughts that are potential and I wonder what's going to happen, and you know, expansive, exciting, enthusiastic energy, then it's going to uplift you. And then when you do go out, you're more likely to meet people and strike up conversation with strangers that then are going to bring more potential of idea generation and connection. So it is your choice, literally, as to, you are not your thoughts. You get to choose your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, you know, I keep talking about the thoughts become things. You know,
yeah,
totally
it's true.
that. So choose your thoughts carefully. You're right, because if you, it's not to like blindly assume that everything's going to be perfect all the time, because bad things do happen. But it's deciding how much of your headspace you want to fill up with negative versus positive.
Yeah.
And and then focus on, like, getting really clear on what you do want, and then focusing on that every day, and then following that with positive real world action towards those things. And you will, if nothing else, you'll get a little bit closer to it. Even if you don't hit your exact target, you will be closer than you ever were.
No, because it's kind of, if not this, then what about even something better?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. If you leave space, then actually you could go on to surprise yourself even more.
Yeah.
Which is a wonderful place to be.
Yeah. Love it.
So we need to get everybody to write their comments. So like whoever's read The Alchemist, like, can they remember at the time they read it what their takeaways were? How, like, you know, how it's influenced people's lives? Because I know, like, to your point at the top of this, you spoke about, you know, people in media kind of raving about it. I'm always interested to know what people's takeaways were from the book, and how it's, because there's one thing, isn't there, reading a book, there's something entirely different about then taking action or learning and then implementing something of that in your life, right?
Yeah, because I think it works at different levels. Like, it is just it is a good story, you know. It is just an entertaining story, but there's so much more to it. It's probably the sort of book that's worth revisiting. You know, you might read it different times in your life, and it'll mean different things, and like you might not fully grasp, or might not be totally bought into some of the concepts behind it, but then when you go back to it, it makes more sense. So definitely it really hit home for me when I read it. I was like, I felt a little bit like Santiago on his journey.
Yeah. Well, it brings you an element of comfort, doesn't it? That you're not the only one, and that actually because I think, you know, it's back to this thing of the shoulding, that especially when we embark on something, especially if it's, you know, a business or a long-term relationship or whatever that is, when something happens where we didn't set out for it to happen in that way, then we can feel like a failure, or part of us feels like we've failed. But I want to ban that word. Like, I just don't think there's such a thing as failure, because we're constantly evolving. So we're constantly shifting. And I think if we embrace that, then we're going to suffer less. Yeah,
exactly.
Enjoy the journey.
If you're not failing, you're not trying.
Well, exactly right. If you're not, who was it? I heard this hilarious, well, it's a podcast I've shared with you, Inner Truth. And there was a guy on there that he was an actor, but before he was a famous actor in LA, he worked for like a medieval fair. And so he used to teach people how to joust. So how to basically be a knight. And he said he would teach people, you know, like obviously how to kind of gain confidence on the horse. And he said that he would overhear some of his students say, oh, well, I've never fallen off the horse. And he went, well, if you've never fallen off, then that means you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to fall off, because when you do fall off, you're going to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't ever fall off, you never know what that feels like. And that's what we're, you know, it's exercising those muscles. And it's that failing forward that actually then you're less scared to fall off, right? Because it's like, well, I fell off before and I got back up again. It's fine.
Yeah, and it wasn't that bad. Yeah, no, there's a lot of, you know, I've started skateboarding again, but like, there's a lot of thinking behind, like, it's actually a good skill, you know, not just like exercise, but I say kids because it's generally kids, right? But kids, not 40-odd-year-old men, right?
It's your inner child, Paul. You're embracing your inner child.
But when you see kids or anyone skateboarding and they keep getting back up again, that is a good sign of like resilience and perseverance. That's a good trait to have, because really you keep on trying. Yeah. So I think that's part of why
it's an important, it's absolutely an important point to make, for sure. Yeah. Well, right, I think we've covered off quite a lot of ground there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more to say about it. Loads of quotes. Might share some more quotes on it at another time. But if anyone's got any comments on The Alchemist or what we've said today, then if you want to post it underneath, the video, or if you've got any suggestions on future books that you would like us to discuss, then say it here.
Yes.
And we'll have to decide what the next one's going to be.
I know. There's so many. Well, it'll be a surprise, but yeah, if anyone's got any ideas, then we'd love to like widen the conversation and hopefully get everybody, like you say, getting inspired by some of these different reads, because there's just so many great books out there. Maybe we should do Feck per Function next.
Yeah, that is a good one. All right. Okay, cool. Right, we'll leave it there then. All right, thanks, Christina.
Thanks,
okay.
Paul. It's fun. See you.
See ya.